Clair Obscur Expedition 33, what a game! Now you might have watched my first video about the optimized settings for this game. In this video we have a detailed look at those settings. And thus we come to the 8 settings to change in Clair Obscur to make it run better. And I have 2 bonuses if you want to mod the game. Bienvenue chez HEnK Gaming, devinez qui je suis. Un moment. That's better. Welcome to HEnK Gaming, guess who I am? And let's dive into those 8 graphic settings of Expedition 33. So, 8 settings, let's go from least impact to most impact. Number 8, the textures. Well, feel like this is cheating a bit in my countdown because textures don't do anything. Now my test scenario was a bit weird, where my low settings use even more VRAM than the epic settings. However, I think it's safe to say that you can play this game with epic textures, epic settings at 4K on 8GB of VRAM. Let's just say that. Number 7, post-processing. Mostly found on a world map, I guess. And well, low is just basically the same as turning off post-processing, but all other levels have some form of post-processing. But to be honest, I think you should leave this one at epic. Epic is the only setting where the distance is also out of focus, and I like that pretty much. Gives you the idea that this is a miniature world when you zoom in on with a camera, and I really like that, so no amount of FPS win can convince me that this setting should be set lower. So we'll leave this one at epic, and to be honest, the wins in turning this down aren't that big. Number 6, reflection. A single reflection. Now early on in the game the reflection setting doesn't have that much of an impact. If you get a little bit further in the game, however, you will notice the difference. So in this scene it's clear that we do not want to set this setting anything lower than high. Further away on the floor the light gets a flickering mess on medium and low. And it also seems that the bronze hasn't been polished in years, it just vaguely reflects light. On epic and high the whole scene still looks very nice. So nice even that I think they almost look identical. High gives you a win of about 1.4% in FPS, going from 74 to 75. So let's stick with high. Number 5, the visual effects. And let's have a look at some of the effects at the Festival de Expedition. And by the way, all those girls are wearing a flower collar. That's sad having to perform on your last day on Earth. Can't even seem to enjoy a nice pension. Someone should stick it to that paintress. But well, visually, low looks worst I think. You have some kind of distortion effects around those colorful poofs they cast. And that distortion effect seems to be gone on low. Let's look at it in slow motion. And there I don't really see a difference between epic high or medium. But I also don't really see a FPS difference between medium and high. So let's go for high here. We gain 1 FPS, about 1.5%, and we probably not hand in too much of the effects. Number 4. Foliage is number 4. Now in our house we have foliage set to low because watering all those plants, man what a work. But in games I really like nature. Lush green worlds is what I would like to see. Now epic, but also high, gives you pretty much that lush green world. On medium I think you start to see too many empty patches of land, and on low it's even worse. Looking at this scene from another angle, in the distance I think this setting doesn't matter that much, but up close you see that bush in front is fully present on epic. On high it's still there, although a little bit thinned out, but on medium it's already almost completely gone. Going from epic to high will give you a nice 3% win in FPS. Would you turn this setting to medium, you would gain 10% in FPS, but I think this will make the world a little too barren. So high it is, especially since you don't have to water any plants yourself. Now playing with this foliage setting around, I found something weird. So, mystery number 3.5. But before we go watching that number 3.5, do you like the video so far? It gets much better. Well, it will be just as good probably. But you will feel much better once you've liked this video. Well, now that's been taken care of, let's have a look at that mystery number 3.5. We're looking down on Lumiere from a building. Setting the preset to low, so all settings are low, you see we have a street and an empty square. Nothing wrong here. Now let's choose the epic preset, but lower all settings to low. You would expect the square to look the same as when choosing the low preset, right? Wrong. you see bits of flower leaves laying around. So apparently the presets change certain settings you have no control over with the other settings. Now setting the low preset, we see it also does perform slightly better than the epic setting with all the settings set to low. Well, now let's do this the other way around. So we start with the low preset and set everything to epic. And we run that next to the epic preset. And you'll see that you will have major pop-in when you start out with the low preset. What pops in looks epic, but it pops in way too close. While on the epic preset you'll still notice some pop-in, but it's way less obvious as there are already some ground textures or base foliage. So I made sure when setting up the game to first select the epic preset and then work from there. Anyway, a long intermezzo, so let's continue with number 3, Global Illumination. And I'm a bit torn on this setting. So looking in this scene, or a lot of other scenes for that matter, I don't think you will notice the Global Illumination setting level that much when moving around in the world. Now going from epic to high gives you the highest win in FPS, going lower to medium another very slight win, and low doesn't really do much more for your FPS counter. So for the optimized settings I would say set the GI to medium. However, walking around in a more tight area like this cave, you can see the light behaving a bit weird and erratic, and this effect is present on all settings lower than epic I think. So yeah, turn this setting to medium, but maybe you might want to switch this to epic in tight spaces or when you think the light is flickering too much. Most of the time you won't really notice this I think, but in some places it bugged me. However, for now we're going for the win of 3.5% in FPS by turning this to medium for the optimized settings. Number 2, Shading. The menu states that this setting adjusts the complexity and quality of shading effects influencing how light interacts with surfaces. Well, that sounds rather impressive. Must have a big visual change then. Remembering that reflection setting, I expected the low setting here to make a world of difference. But well, not really. Looking at the world I had a difficult time seeing the effect of this one. Wonder if I'm missing something. So I do see a slight improvement in FPS going lower than epic, but going lower than high doesn't really seem to impact FPS. And just to be sure that I'm looking at the right things, I put low and epic next to each other so we see a bit more of the scene, but I really don't see any visual change. Well, since going to high gave something of an improvement in FPS, let's set shading to high. And then the long-awaited number 1. The shadow settings of course, making the biggest difference in performance when turning this to our optimized level. And who doesn't like a good shadow? And to be honest, the shadows are pretty good in Clair Obscur. Look at Gustav here, well, look at his shadow. On epic, it's nice and sharp at his feet, but going further away from him, his shoulders have a bit more fuzziness in the shadow. That's very nice and realistic, and we still have that effect on high setting as well. The medium setting brings back those days where shadows were a bit more simple, just nice clean sharp shadows of everything. You can see it from the wall in the background, it's pretty sharp. Low has the same shadow effect as medium here, but just a little bit less sharp. Now I think the medium shadow looks pretty good, especially when playing. I doubt you will notice that a shadow is too sharp or too soft. You will more likely notice shadows missing or popping in. And speaking about pop-in, let's look at the shadow from a distance. And well, looking at a distance, I think medium still looks nice. Even that crane has a nice shadow, where on low it gets a bit too blurry, not making out the object very well. So we'll go for the win in FPS of about 11%. I did find that some shadows of characters could pop in a bit close by, but not so close by becomes bothersome I think. However, if you do find the pop-in distance bothersome, increase the shadow quality to high, but know that you will still have a little bit of pop-in just a bit further away. Anyway, that sums up all the settings, but I did promise 2 bonuses if you want to mod the game. So yes, let's have a look at modding. And the first one is ClairObscurFix. This made the demos of the in-game movies run at a normal frame rate instead of the fixed 30 FPS. I like that because my TV was getting a bit confused with the frame rate switch. It started to switch away from VRR mode to normal mode and such. Now these in-game movies are a bit heavier to run than the normal gameplay, so don't expect a solid 60 FPS all of the time. And maybe you want to have your scenes run at that 30 FPS to have your VSync keep things nice and clean. But with a VRR screen especially, I think this mod is cool. And then the second bonus. Clair Obscur is unfortunately lacking HDR. Now you can turn on the NVIDIA RTX HDR, but better to download the next mod, the RenoDX HDR Tone Map Color Grade. Looking at the Lumiere Fest, left is the vanilla game and right is the HDR mod enabled game. And I think it looks way better. It just has a more color depth to it. Light stands out more, punchier, and the darks are way darker and have way more contrast in it. Well, it says I'm trying to describe HDR to you. So yeah, this mod adds proper HDR to the game and I really like it. So go download it and use it. Links in the descriptions of course, as well as for the ClairObscurFix mod. And there you have it, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Gameplay you currently see is of the game running with my optimized settings and those two mods installed. It's a cool game, so really check it out. If you have Game Pass, well, you already have it, so go ahead. Now for the first time ever, well, second time I guess, I already used this in the optimized settings video, but I'm using an affiliate link, so if you want to buy Clair Obscur because you don't have Game Pass, have a look down below and support the channel by buying the game. Nothing more left to say than thank you for watching and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't watched that first video about the optimized settings, have a look at that one. You might learn something about which DLSS preset to use. And if you don't have an NVIDIA card, you learn nothing, but oh well. Thank you for watching, enjoy your baguette, and houdoe!